My name is Rachel Wilson, 32 years old, and I never imagined my birthday would end with me changing the locks on my heart. For 7 years, I had been paying the mortgage on my parents' house while they enjoyed retirement. Then came that text during my birthday dinner: "You're not our priority right now." Something inside me broke and healed simultaneously. I left them a note: "Then don't expect me to be yours." Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe to join my healing journey. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Boston, where the houses were close enough that you could smell what your neighbors were cooking for dinner. My parents, Linda and Thomas Wilson, were initially attentive and loving when I was very young. My early memories are filled with park visits, bedtime stories, and weekend family outings. But as I grew older, their careers began taking center stage in our family dynamics. By the time I hit middle school, I was often coming home to an empty house, making my own dinner, and checking my homework without any guidance. My father worked in finance, while my mother was a real estate agent. They would come home late, exhausted, with just enough energy to ask if I had completed my assignments before retreating to their bedroom. "We're working this hard for your future, Rachel," my mother would say whenever I expressed disappointment about their absence at school events. When I turned 16, everything changed dramatically. My father made a risky investment in a startup tech company that promised incredible returns. Instead, the company went bankrupt within 8 months, taking my father's investment and a significant portion of their savings with it. Our comfortable middle-class lifestyle crumbled almost overnight. The financial strain was immediate and severe. Arguments about money became the soundtrack of our home. My mother took on additional clients, while my father scrambled to rebuild his career reputation. I started working at a local coffee shop after school to help with expenses, often studying behind the counter during slow periods. Despite the chaos at home, I maintained excellent grades. When college acceptance letters arrived, I received several offers with partial scholarships, but nothing that would cover all expenses. My parents sat me down for what they called an adult conversation. "We always plan to help with your education, sweetheart," my father said, "but after what happened, we just don't have it. You'll need to figure this out on your own." My college years were a blur of exhaustion. I worked 3 part-time jobs while maintaining a full course load. Many nights I survived on vending machine snacks and 4 hours of sleep. When other students went home for holidays, I picked up extra shifts. My parents rarely asked about my studies, seeming almost relieved that I was handling everything independently. I graduated with a degree in finance and business administration, landing an entry-level position at a respected firm. By 24, I had worked my way up to financial analyst, surprising even myself with how quickly my career was advancing. My salary increased, my student loans shrank, and I finally felt financially secure. Then came the call that would reshape the next 7 years of my life. "Rachel, we need to talk to you about something important." My mother's voice trembled over the phone. "The bank, they're threatening foreclosure." It turned out my parents, now both 58, had accumulated substantial debt since my father's business failure. They had refinanced their mortgage multiple times, taken out personal loans, and maxed out credit cards. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments, and the bank was preparing to begin foreclosure proceedings. "We don't know what to do," my father admitted, his voice lacking the confidence I remembered from childhood. "We're too old to start over somewhere new." Looking at their defeated expressions as they sat in my small apartment kitchen, I made a decision that seemed logical at the time. I had recently received a modest bonus and had been saving efficiently. "I'll take over the mortgage payments," I offered, "just until you get back on your feet." The relief on their faces was immediate. My mother hugged me tightly, whispering, "We raised such a good daughter." What began as temporary assistance quickly became a permanent arrangement. Each month, I transferred $2,100 to cover their mortgage payment. At first, my parents expressed profound gratitude. They invited me for dinner weekly and called regularly to check in. But gradually, their appreciation evolved into expectation. 6 months into this arrangement, I noticed their social media posts showing new purchases, designer clothes, restaurant dinners, weekend getaways. When I gently asked about their spending habits, given their financial situation, my mother became defensive. "We've worked hard our entire lives," she said. "Now that we're retired, we deserve to enjoy ourselves a little. You're doing so well in your career. This is hardly a burden for you." Their attitude toward my assistance shifted from gratitude to entitlement. The mortgage payment became an unspoken obligation rather than a generous gesture. Meanwhile, a pattern emerged of my parents missing my important life events. When I graduated with my MBA after 3 years of night classes, they chose to attend a neighbor's wedding instead. "You already had one graduation ceremony," my father reasoned. "This is Janet's only wedding, probably." When my appendix ruptured, requiring emergency surgery, they were on a cruise in the Caribbean. "We'd cancel if we could," my mother explained via text, "but these tickets were non-refundable, and we've been planning this for months." My engagement party to my then-boyfriend Mark was scheduled 3 months in advance. The week before, my father called to inform me he couldn't attend because of a golf tournament he had qualified for. My mother chose to accompany him rather than come alone. "You understand, right?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. "This is a huge opportunity for your father to network." The relationship with Mark eventually ended, partly because he couldn't understand the one-sided dynamic with my parents. "They take advantage of you," he would say, "and you let them." My therapist, whom I started seeing after the breakup, suggested establishing clearer boundaries with my parents. "Financial support doesn't have to mean emotional subservience," she advised. But every time I attempted to implement boundaries, guilt would overwhelm me. They were still my parents, after all. Last month, I received a significant promotion at work. I organized a small celebration dinner, inviting my parents and a few close friends. My mother called that afternoon. "Something's come up with my book club," she explained. "It's an emergency meeting about our upcoming charity event." My father got on the line, "And you know I can't drive into the city during evening traffic. My blood pressure just can't handle it." The pattern continued, but I kept paying their mortgage, convincing myself that this financial support was my filial duty. Then came my 32nd birthday, the first since my engagement had ended. This birthday felt particularly significant. I needed to feel surrounded by people who truly cared about me. I made reservations at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant I had wanted to try for years, but could never justify the expense. This time, I decided to splurge, inviting my closest friends and, of course, my parents. "We wouldn't miss it for the world," my mother promised when I called to confirm the week before. "Your father has it marked on his calendar." I believed them. Perhaps that was my biggest mistake. I woke up on my birthday with a sense of cautious optimism. This year would be different. I had spent the previous evening picking out the perfect dress, a midnight blue cocktail number that made me feel confident and beautiful. I scheduled an early appointment at a salon to have my hair styled, something I rarely indulged in. "Special occasion?" the stylist asked as she worked on my hair. "My birthday," I replied with a small smile. "Dinner at Bellini's tonight." "Fancy. Who's coming?" "My closest friends, and my parents," I added, trying to sound certain. After the salon, I went home to finish getting ready. I had reserved a table for 7 people at 7:30 p.m. My reservation included a special request for a bottle of champagne to be waiting at the table and a small area for gifts. The restaurant had even agreed to bring out a special dessert with a candle after dinner. I arrived at Bellini's 20 minutes early to make sure everything was arranged perfectly. The hostess, a young woman named Jenna, led me to our table by the window. "The champagne will be brought out once your entire party arrives," she explained. "And we've made note of the dessert surprise." I thanked her and sat down, placing a few small decorations on the table, nothing extravagant, just enough to make the evening feel special. My friend Stephanie was the first to arrive, giving me a warm hug and placing a beautifully wrapped package on the table. "Happy birthday, Rach," she exclaimed. "You look amazing." Within the next 15 minutes, all my friends had arrived. Madison brought flowers, Alex had a gift bag with tissue paper peeking out the top, and Daniel and his wife Katie arrived with a card that I strongly suspected contained concert tickets based on their excited expressions. Everyone was seated, making conversation and ordering drinks, but the 2 chairs reserved for my parents remained empty. I checked my phone. 7:35 p.m. They were only 5 minutes late, which wasn't unusual. I texted a quick, "We're all here at the table," message to my mother and returned to the conversation. By 7:50 p.m., I had checked my phone at least 10 times. No messages, no calls. The server had come by twice to ask if we wanted to order appetizers, and I had stalled, saying we should wait for the final guests. "Should we try calling them?" Stephanie asked quietly. Noticing my growing anxiety. "Let me try one more text," I replied, typing quickly under the table. At 8:15 p.m., the champagne had been served without my parents, and my friends had gently suggested we order food. I was in the middle of half-heartedly looking at the menu when my phone buzzed. My heart leapt, expecting an apology and an explanation about traffic or a misunderstanding about the time. Instead, the message read, "Can't make it tonight. Your father found tickets to that jazz show he wanted to see. You're not our priority right now. Celebrate with your friends. Love you." The words hit me like a physical blow. I read the message 3 times, thinking perhaps I had misunderstood. "You're not our priority right now." The phrasing was so blunt, so dismissive. It wasn't, "We're sorry." Something came up, or even a more gentle excuse. It was an explicit statement that I did not matter enough. I must have visibly reacted because Stephanie immediately asked, "What's wrong, Rachel?" I couldn't find words. Instead, I handed her my phone with the message still on screen. Her eyes widened as she read, then narrowed in anger. "They can't be serious," she said. Her voice a mix of shock and indignation. "What is it?" Alex asked, concerned by our expressions. Stephanie looked at me for permission, and when I nodded numbly, she read the message aloud to our small group. The table fell silent. Daniel muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. "I'm so sorry, Rachel." Katie reached across the table to squeeze my hand. There's no excuse for that." I tried to smile, to pretend this was just a minor disappointment. "It's fine. Let's just enjoy dinner." But it wasn't fine. The evening proceeded with a hollow feeling at its center. My friends tried their best to create a festive atmosphere. They ordered appetizers to share, kept conversation flowing, and even convinced the server to bring the special birthday dessert. I blew out the candle without making a wish, forcing a smile for the photo Madison insisted on taking. I opened their thoughtful gifts with genuine appreciation, but there was a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't dissipate. When Daniel and Katie presented the concert tickets, I thanked them enthusiastically while wondering if my parents were enjoying their jazz show more than they would have enjoyed my company. By the time dinner ended, I had mastered the art of the fake smile. I hugged each friend goodbye, assuring them I was fine and thanking them for making the evening special despite the circumstances. But when I got into my car, alone in the dark interior, the facade crumbled. Tears streamed down my face as I sat in the parking lot, unable to even start the engine. 7 years of financial support. 7 years of rearranging my life to help them maintain theirs. 7 years of excuses, missed events, and growing entitlement. And what had I received in return? "You're not our priority right now." The drive home was a blur of streetlights and memories. Every disappointment, every missed moment, every excuse played through my mind like a movie I couldn't turn off. My therapist's voice echoed in my thoughts. "There's a difference between being generous and being taken advantage of." When I finally arrived home and checked my social media before bed, the final insult appeared on my screen. My parents had posted selfies from the jazz concert, both smiling widely with the caption, "Surprise tickets to see our favorite quartet. Best night ever." The timestamp showed they had posted this during what should have been my birthday dinner. The best night ever was the night they chose to skip their only daughter's birthday celebration. Something inside me shifted permanently in that moment. I pulled into my driveway just after 11 p.m., exhausted both emotionally and physically. As I approached my front door, I noticed a small gift bag hanging from the doorknob. My parents must have dropped it off earlier in the day. Inside was a beige scarf with a small floral pattern, generic and impersonal. The price tag was still attached, showing it had been purchased from a discount department store for $19.99. Not that the price mattered, but the lack of thought was painfully evident. I had mentioned several times over the past few months that I was saving for a new tablet for my digital art hobby. The scarf wasn't even in colors I typically wore. I placed the scarf on my kitchen counter and sat down heavily on my couch, my mind flooding with memories of all the significant moments my parents had chosen to miss. My college graduation 4 years ago, I stood among thousands of other graduates in my cap and gown, scanning the crowd repeatedly for my parents' faces. They had chosen to attend my mother's coworker Janet's wedding instead. It's an important networking opportunity, my mother had explained when she called to tell me they wouldn't make it. I accepted my diploma without anyone cheering specifically for me. The hospital stay after my appendix surgery 2 years back, I woke up groggy from anesthesia. The room empty except for a nurse checking my vitals. My parents were on day 3 of a 2-week Caribbean cruise. These tickets were non-refundable, Rachel. We'll call to check on you when we reach the next port with good cell service, my father had texted. I was discharged into a taxi instead of a family member's car. My engagement party to Mark 18 months ago, we had planned an intimate gathering at his parents' home, with a catered dinner and champagne toast. My future in-laws had been so excited to blend our families. 2 days before, my father qualified for a golf tournament he'd been trying to enter for years. This is huge for my retirement social life, he'd explained. My mother went with him for moral support. I introduced myself to Mark's extended family alone, explaining repeatedly where my parents were. My promotion celebration last month, after 5 years of working 60-hour weeks and sacrificing vacations. I had finally been promoted to senior financial advisor. The small dinner I planned was as much about thanking my support network as it was celebrating my achievement. My mother's book club emergency and my father's traffic anxiety meant they missed this milestone too. I gave a toast thanking everyone who had supported my journey, painfully aware of the 2 empty chairs. And now my 32nd birthday, the first one since Mark and I had broken up, when I needed family support more than ever. Instead of being there for me, they chose a last-minute jazz concert. You're not our priority right now. I walked to my home office and opened my banking app, curious about something that had been nagging at me. I scrolled through my transaction history, noting the monthly mortgage payments of $2,100 dutifully transferred to my parents' account. Then I looked at the linked account I had set up years ago to help monitor their spending, ostensibly to ensure they were staying financially responsible. What I found made my stomach clench. In the past month alone, while I continued to pay their mortgage, they had spent $3,000 on new golf clubs for my father, $2,500 on a luxury weekend getaway to a spa resort, $200 on a shopping spree at high-end department stores. This wasn't a one-time splurge. Scrolling back through months of transactions revealed a pattern of lavish spending, expensive restaurants, designer clothes, electronics, home decor items. All while I lived frugally in my modest 1-bedroom apartment, rarely taking vacations and carefully budgeting for even small luxuries. A notification popped up on my screen. Scheduled transfer, $2,100 to Wilson household account in 3 days. I stared at that notification for what felt like hours. Something fundamental shifted inside me as I sat there, the glow of the screen illuminating my tear-streaked face. I opened a calculator app and did some quick math. $2. $100 per month for 7 years equals $25,200 per year times 7 equals $176,400. $176,400. The number stared back at me, representing not just money but years of sacrifice, missed opportunities, and deferred dreams. I could have put a down payment on a house of my own. I could have traveled, invested in my art, or simply lived without the constant stress of supporting 3 adults on 1 income. And what had that money bought me? A place on my parents' priority list somewhere below jazz concerts and golf tournaments. In that moment, I made a decision. I canceled the scheduled transfer. Then I opened a document on my computer and began drafting a note. The first version was angry, filled with accusations and years of pent-up hurt. I deleted it. The second was too apologetic, still seeking approval while attempting to establish boundaries. I deleted that too. After several attempts, I settled on a message that was clear, firm, and unapologetic. After 7 years and $176 for 100 of supporting you while being treated as an afterthought, I've realized that if I'm not your priority, you shouldn't expect to be mine. I will no longer be making your mortgage payments or providing financial support. You have 30 days to make other arrangements. This is not a negotiation. I printed the note, signed it, and placed it in an envelope. Even though it was nearly 1 a.m., I drove to my parents' house, knowing they would still be awake. Their lights were on, and I could hear laughter and music from inside, probably reliving their wonderful evening at the jazz concert. Rather than knocking, I slipped the envelope into their mailbox. Then I returned to my car, turned off my phone completely, and drove home. For the first time in years, I took a sleeping pill to ensure I would get a full night's rest without anxiety dreams or middle-of-the-night panic about my parents' financial situation. As I drifted off to sleep, I realized that the heaviness in my chest had lifted. In its place was something unfamiliar but welcome: peace. I woke up the next morning feeling more rested than I had in years. The sun was streaming through my blinds, and for a moment, I simply enjoyed the quiet. Then I remembered everything that had happened and reached for my phone. After powering it on, notifications flooded my screen. 36 missed calls, 24 text messages, 13 voicemails, 8 email alerts. The first text had been sent at 7:15 a.m. Rachel, what is this note? Call us immediately. The messages grew increasingly frantic. 8:30 a.m. This isn't funny. We need to talk right now. 9:45 a.m. You can't just stop paying our mortgage without warning. 10:20 a.m. Your father is very upset. His blood pressure is rising. 11:15 a.m. If you don't call back, we're coming over. 12:30 p.m. We're on our way to your apartment. Be there. The voicemails followed a similar pattern, starting with confusion, moving to anger, then to panic, and finally to threats and guilt trips. My mother's voice in the last message was tearful. How could you do this to the people who raised you? After everything we've sacrificed for you. Instead of calling them back immediately, I did something I had never done before. I put myself first. I muted my phone, made myself a proper breakfast, and booked a last-minute appointment at a day spa. I had been saving those spa gift cards my friends had given me for when I had time. Today, I would make time. As I drove to my appointment, I felt a strange mix of guilt and exhilaration. The guilt was familiar, almost comfortable in its persistence. The exhilaration was new, a bubbling sense of freedom and self-determination. For the first time in 7 years, I had made a financial decision based solely on what was best for me. When I returned home that afternoon, there was a note taped to my door in my mother's handwriting. We waited for 3 hours. Call us as soon as you get this. I took the note down, went inside, and found an email from my father with the subject line, "You've made a terrible mistake." The email was a mixture of anger and manipulation. He detailed all the ways they had supported me throughout my childhood, conveniently omitting the past decade of our relationship. He reminded me that they were getting older and couldn't be expected to re-enter the workforce at their age. He ended with, "If you want to continue having parents, you'll reconsider this childish action." My phone rang almost immediately after I finished reading the email. It was my best friend, Stephanie. "Your mom called me," she said without preamble. "She said you're not answering your phone and they're worried about you." "I'm fine," I assured her. "More than fine, actually." I finally stood up for myself. I explained what had happened, from the birthday text to my decision to stop the payments. Stephanie listened without interrupting, then said simply, "It's about time. What can I do to help?" Her support meant everything. We talked for nearly an hour, making plans for dinner later that week and discussing strategies for maintaining my boundaries in the face of what would likely be significant pressure from my parents. Just as we were saying goodbye, I received a call from my brother Jason. He and I had never been particularly close, largely because he had moved across the country for college and stayed there. Our parents had paid his full tuition and expenses, something they had reminded me of whenever I mentioned my student loan struggles. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded when I answered. Mom and Dad called me freaking out about losing their house. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, including the years of financial support I had provided and the consistent pattern of being treated as an afterthought. Jason was quiet for a long moment. "I had no idea," he finally said. "They told me they were doing fine financially. They've been sending me money for Christmas and birthdays every year." This revelation stung. While I had been paying their mortgage, they had been sending my brother gifts. But as Jason continued talking, I learned something even more disturbing. "Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this," he said. His voice lowered as if our parents might somehow overhear, but they came to visit me last year and let slip that they had inherited money from Grandma Rose. Not a fortune, but enough to live comfortably if they budgeted properly. I felt as if the floor had dropped out from under me. "When did Grandma Rose pass away? Why didn't they tell me?" 3 years ago. "They said they told you, but you couldn't make it to the funeral because of work." I had never been informed of my grandmother's death, let alone her funeral. And I certainly hadn't known about any inheritance. 3 years of paying their mortgage while they had sufficient funds to cover it themselves. After ending the call with Jason, I checked my email again and found a security alert from my bank. Someone had attempted to access my account with an incorrect password multiple times. The IP address matched my parents' home internet provider. I immediately changed all my passwords, security questions, and contact information. I removed my parents as emergency contacts on all my accounts and updated my address where they might still have had my previous apartment listed. The next day, my Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, called. "Rachel, honey, I don't know what's going on between you and your parents, but they're absolutely beside themselves. Your mother was crying when she called me." I had always liked Aunt Susan, but I recognized the guilt tactic. Did they tell you why I stopped paying their mortgage? Did they mention the text they sent on my birthday? Or the hundreds of thousands of dollars I've already given them? There was a pause. "They said you were upset about missing a dinner, but that seems like an extreme reaction." I laughed without humor. "That's what they told you. Let me fill you in." I proceeded to explain everything, including what Jason had revealed about the inheritance. Aunt Susan's tone changed completely. "I had no idea. Rose left them money? They told everyone the estate just covered funeral expenses." She sighed heavily. "Rachel, you're absolutely right to set boundaries. I'm sorry I called to pressure you." The validation from a family member strengthened my resolve, which was fortunate because the next day brought a new escalation. I arrived at work to find my administrative assistant, Carla, looking uncomfortable. "Your parents are waiting in the lobby," she said quietly. "They don't have an appointment. I told them you were in meetings all morning, but they said they'd wait." I felt a flash of anger at this invasion of my workplace. "How long have they been here?" "Almost an hour." "Should I call security?" I considered it, but then shook my head. "No, I'll handle it. But could you please let Diane in HR know what's happening? Just in case this becomes an ongoing issue." I squared my shoulders and walked to the lobby, where my parents sat stiffly on a sofa. They stood when they saw me, my father's face flushed with anger, my mother's eyes red from crying. "We need to talk," my father said loudly enough that the receptionist glanced over. "Not here," I replied firmly. "This is my workplace. I've already spoken with HR about potential harassment." My mother gasped. "Harassment? We're your parents. And this is inappropriate. If you want to talk, you can email me to set up a time to meet somewhere neutral. Now please leave before I am forced to have security escort you out." I turned and walked back to my office without waiting for their response. My hands were shaking, but a sense of pride washed over me. I had maintained my boundaries firmly and clearly. Later that afternoon, my boss, Michael, stopped by my office. "Everything okay, Rachel? I heard there was some sort of situation this morning." I debated how much to share, then decided on honesty. "My parents are having a difficult time accepting some financial boundaries I've recently established." I apologize for them showing up here. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Family situations can be challenging. If you need to take a personal day or two to sort things out, that's not a problem. Your work has been exceptional, and you've accumulated plenty of unused vacation time. His understanding and support meant more than he could know. Thank you. I might take you up on that if things escalate further. And escalate they did. Over the next few days, my parents employed increasingly desperate tactics. They sent emails to my personal and work accounts with embarrassing childhood photos attached, threatening to post them publicly if I didn't respond. They contacted my ex-fiancé Mark, who called me confused about why my parents were telling him I was having a mental breakdown. They showed up at my favorite coffee shop where I often worked on Saturday mornings, causing a scene that ended with the manager asking them to leave. They left notes on my car when I was grocery shopping, ranging from pleading to accusatory. Through it all, I maintained my silence, responding only with brief emails reiterating my boundary. I am not discussing this further. You have 30 days from my original note to make other arrangements for your mortgage. Then, on day 25 of the 30-day timeline I had given them, I received a forwarded email from my father. It was a formal notice from their mortgage company, notice of foreclosure proceedings. The notice stated that they were not just 1 month behind on their mortgage, as I had assumed would be the case when I stopped payments. They were actually 4 months behind. Further reading revealed that they hadn't been using my monthly transfers to pay the full mortgage amount. They had been making partial payments and using the rest of my money for their personal expenses. Even more concerning, they hadn't been paying their property taxes for the past 2 years. The county had placed a lien on the house, which had triggered the foreclosure process despite the partial mortgage payments. The depth of their financial mismanagement was staggering. They had been using me as a personal ATM while actively hiding their true financial situation. The foreclosure notice was their last attempt to scare me into resuming payments. But it had the opposite effect. It reinforced that I had made the right decision to separate my finances from their irresponsible behavior. After receiving the foreclosure notice, I knew a direct confrontation was inevitable. Rather than waiting for my parents to ambush me again, I decided to control the circumstances of our meeting. I sent them an email suggesting we meet at Riverside Coffee Shop, a public place where I felt comfortable, but that wasn't too personal to me. I will meet you tomorrow at 10 a.m. to discuss the foreclosure notice, I wrote. This is a one-time conversation. If you cannot maintain appropriate behavior, I will leave immediately. They agreed with surprising speed, probably desperate for any opportunity to speak with me face-to-face. I arrived 15 minutes early to secure a table in the corner where we would have some privacy without being completely isolated. I ordered a latte and tried to calm my racing heart. My parents arrived exactly at 10, which was unusual for them. They typically ran late to everything except, apparently, opportunities to pressure me financially. My father looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. My mother had clearly tried to look put together, but her makeup couldn't hide the stress lines around her mouth. They sat down without ordering anything, both staring at me with expressions that mixed anger and desperation. My father spoke first. "You've put us in an impossible situation," he said, his voice tight. "The bank is going to take our home." I took a sip of my latte, using the moment to gather my thoughts. The foreclosure notice shows you're 4 months behind on payments, even though I've been sending money every month. It also shows you haven't paid property taxes in 2 years. Where has that money been going? My mother fidgeted with her purse strap. We had other expenses. You don't understand what it's like to manage a household. Actually, I understand perfectly, I replied. I've been managing my household on a budget that included an extra $2.100 monthly payment due. A payment you apparently weren't using for its intended purpose. My father's face reddened. We shouldn't have to justify every penny to our daughter. We raised you, clothed you, fed you for 18 years. His voice had risen enough that several nearby customers turned to look. I lowered my own voice, forcing him to lean in to hear me. That was your obligation as parents. I had no obligation to pay your mortgage for 7 years as an adult. That was a choice I made out of love and concern. A choice you have taken advantage of consistently. Taken advantage? My mother's voice cracked with indignation. How can you say that? We gave you life. Let's be specific about what's happened, I said, pulling out a small notebook where I had prepared some notes. Over the past 7 years, I have provided $176,400 in mortgage payments. During that time, you have missed my college graduation, my hospital stay after emergency surgery, my engagement party, my promotion celebration, and most recently, my birthday dinner. Each time, you chose something you wanted to do instead, making it clear where I stand in your priorities. My father waved his hand dismissively. Those are just events. Material things. Family is deeper than attending parties. If family is so important, I countered, why did neither of you tell me that Grandma Rose died 3 years ago? Or that she left you an inheritance? They both froze, exchanging a quick glance that confirmed everything Jason had told me. That was a complicated situation, my mother stammered. We didn't want to burden you with grief while you were so busy with work. And the inheritance? My father cleared his throat. It wasn't much. Barely covered some debts. Jason says differently. I replied. And the bank statements I've seen show significant spending on luxury items, not debt repayment. A young barista approached our table, asking if my parents wanted to order anything. My father snapped at her to leave us alone, causing her to retreat with a hurt expression. The interaction perfectly exemplified how they treated people they felt entitled to mistreat. The truth, I continued after the barista left, is that you've been hiding your financial situation from me while simultaneously exploiting my willingness to help. You had retirement savings that you spent on luxuries, assuming I would continue covering your basic expenses indefinitely. We deserve to enjoy our retirement, my mother protested. We worked hard our entire lives. So have I replied quietly. I worked through college with 3 jobs while carrying a full course load. I built my career working 60-hour weeks. I sacrificed my own financial security, my relationships, and my peace of mind to support you. And you couldn't even attend my birthday dinner. It was just dinner, my father muttered. It wasn't just dinner. It was the message that came with it. You're not our priority right now. Well, now you're not mine. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But I recognized the tactical nature of her emotion. She had always cried when confronted with uncomfortable truths. We sacrificed everything for you when you were growing up, she said through her tears. We put you first, always. Did you? Because I remember being left alone most evenings while you both worked late. I remember making my own dinner at 12 years old. I remember checking my own homework because neither of you had time. I remember being told there was no money for my college education while Jason's was fully funded. My father's face darkened with anger. So this is revenge? For perceived childhood slights. This isn't revenge. This is a boundary. I'm establishing the financial independence you should have maintained all along. You're both in your mid-60s, not 90. You're capable of working, of downsizing, of budgeting appropriately. You've simply chosen not to because I made it too easy to rely on me. If you go through with this, my father threatened, leaning across the table, I'll make sure every family member knows how you abandoned your parents in their time of need. I smiled without humor. Feel free. I've already spoken with Aunt Susan and Jason. They know the full story, including the inheritance. I have nothing to hide. My mother grabbed my hand across the table. Rachel, please. We're sorry about the birthday dinner. We'll make it up to you. I gently but firmly removed my hand from hers. This isn't about one missed dinner. This is about 7 years of one-sided support and sacrifice. I'm not asking for repayment. I'm not even asking for gratitude at this point. I'm simply stepping back from financial responsibility for your lives. What do you expect us to do? My father demanded. Become homeless? I expect you to do what any other adults would do in your situation. Sell the house and buy something within your means. Get part-time jobs. Use your Social Security and whatever remains of Grandma Rose's inheritance. Create and follow a budget that reflects your actual income, not the income you had when I was subsidizing you. And if we can't, my mother asked tearfully, that would be your choice, not mine. I'm giving you a clear option. Accept these new boundaries and adapt. Or continue fighting them and potentially lose your relationship with me entirely. My father stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Come on, Linda. She's made up her mind. She doesn't care what happens to us. I do care, I said, remaining seated. That's why I gave you 30 days notice instead of just stopping payments without warning. The way you canceled on my birthday without warning. That's why I'm sitting here explaining myself instead of simply cutting contact. My mother stood more slowly, her expression torn between anger and fear. This isn't over, Rachel. You'll realize what a mistake you're making. The only mistake I made was not establishing these boundaries years ago. I replied. I wish you both well, truly. But my financial support ends as stated in my note. They walked out of the coffee shop, my father's arm around my mother's shoulders as she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. I remained at the table, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. A woman at the next table caught my eye. I couldn't help overhearing, she said. I just wanted to say, that took incredible courage. I thanked her with a small smile, gathering my things to leave. As I walked to my car, I felt the emotional weight of the confrontation hit me. I barely made it inside before the tears came, not tears of regret but of release. 7 years of suppressed frustration, hurt, and anger poured out as I sat alone in my parked car. When I finally composed myself enough to drive home, I checked my phone to find a text from my mother that simply read, I never wanted it to come to this. You've given us a lot to think about. It wasn't an apology or an acceptance of responsibility, but it was the first message from either of them that wasn't an accusation or a demand. It was a tiny opening, a small acknowledgement that perhaps they understood, at least partially, why I had taken this stand. It wasn't much, but it was a start. The day after our confrontation at the coffee shop, I made an appointment with a financial advisor. I needed expert guidance to ensure my parents couldn't access any of my accounts and to create a plan for the money that would no longer be going toward their mortgage. Based on what you've shared, the advisor said after reviewing my finances, you could put a down payment on your own home within 6 months if you maintain your current saving rate. The possibility of owning my own home, something that had seemed like a distant dream for years, suddenly felt achievable. I left the appointment with a comprehensive financial plan and a renewed sense of purpose. That evening, I made another important decision. I needed time and space to process everything that had happened without constant pressure from my parents. I composed an email to them. I need 30 days of no contact to reflect on our relationship and determine what kind of connection, if any, we can maintain moving forward. During this time, please do not call, text, email, visit my home, or contact me at work. If there is an actual medical emergency, you may contact Stephanie, who will reach out to me. Any attempt to circumvent this boundary will result in an extension of the no-contact period. This time is not meant as punishment, but as necessary space for healing. I sent the email, then muted all notifications from their contact information. For the first time in 7 years, I would have a month free from their influence, expectations, and demands. The first week was surprisingly difficult. Despite their negative impact on my life, I found myself wondering how they were doing, whether they were making arrangements for their mortgage, if they were angry or sad or reflective. I had to constantly remind myself that their emotions and situations were not my responsibility. I joined an online support group for adult children of entitled parents, finding comfort in stories similar to mine. One evening, I shared my experience with the group, including the text message that had been the breaking point. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, with many members sharing how they had established their own boundaries with parents who had taken advantage of them. The guilt you're feeling is normal, one member wrote. They installed those buttons in you from childhood. It takes time to disconnect them. The second week of no contact, Stephanie organized a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin with our friend group. Surrounded by people who genuinely valued and respected me, I observed how healthy relationships functioned. There was give and take, appreciation expressed freely, and a natural desire to contribute to each other's happiness without keeping score. You seem different, Madison commented as we sat by the lake watching the sunset. More relaxed somehow. I realized she was right. The constant background anxiety of wondering when my parents would next demand something from me had disappeared. I was sleeping better, laughing more easily, and feeling a sense of lightness I hadn't experienced in years. During the third week, I began therapy sessions specifically focused on establishing and maintaining boundaries. My therapist helped me understand the difference between guilt and responsibility. Guilt is what we feel when we've done something wrong, she explained. Responsibility is recognizing what is and isn't ours to carry. You haven't done anything wrong by stopping financial support that was being misused. You're simply acknowledging that their financial situation is their responsibility, not yours. We worked through exercises to help me recognize and counter the guilt trips and manipulation tactics my parents had used effectively for so long. Each session left me feeling more confident in my decision and more capable of maintaining my boundaries when the no-contact period ended. In my newfound free time, I explored interests I had neglected while focusing on work and supporting my parents. I signed up for a digital art class I had been interested in for years, but never had time for. I joined a hiking group that met on weekend mornings. I redecorated my apartment, creating a space that truly reflected my personality and preferences rather than just being a place to sleep between work shifts. I also reconnected with friends my parents had subtly discouraged me from seeing. My college roommate Catherine, whom my mother had always claimed was using me for my organizational skills, turned out to be as genuine and supportive as I had originally thought. My former colleague David, whom my father had suggested was only interested in me romantically, welcomed me back into his board game group with no agenda beyond friendship. As the fourth week began, I received an unexpected letter in the mail. The envelope contained my parents' handwriting, but respected my no-contact boundary by using the postal service rather than direct electronic communication. I set it aside until my next therapy session, where I could open it with professional support in case its contents were manipulative or hurtful. Would you like to read it now? My therapist asked when I mentioned the letter. I nodded, carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter from both my parents. It began with something I hadn't expected. "We are sorry." The letter acknowledged, perhaps for the first time, how their behavior had affected me. They admitted to taking my financial support for granted and to prioritizing their wants over my needs. They explained, but didn't excuse, how easy it had been to fall into patterns of entitlement once I began helping them. Most surprisingly, they detailed the steps they had taken during our no-contact period, putting their house on the market, applying for part-time jobs, consulting with a financial advisor about their retirement funds, and creating a realistic budget based on their actual income without my contributions. "We understand if you need more time," the letter concluded. "But when you're ready, we would like to meet with you in the presence of a family therapist to discuss how we might rebuild our relationship on healthier terms." The letter wasn't perfect. There were still hints of justification for their past behavior and a few subtle attempts to elicit sympathy. But it represented a level of reflection and accountability I hadn't seen from them before. "What do you think?" my therapist asked after I finished reading. "I think it's a start," I replied cautiously. "But I'm not sure I trust it yet." That's completely understandable. Trust is rebuilt gradually through consistent action, not just words. We discussed how I might respond when the no-contact period ended, and what boundaries would need to remain firmly in place regardless of any apparent changes in my parents' attitudes. By the end of the session, I had decided to accept their suggestion of meeting with a family therapist as a neutral third party, but only after verifying that they had actually taken the steps they claimed in their letter. On the final day of the no-contact period, I sent a brief email. "I received your letter. I would be willing to meet with you and a family therapist. Please send me the names of 3 therapists you've researched, and I will select one for our first session." Their response came quickly, with 3 therapist names as requested, along with their credentials and specialties. I researched each one and selected Dr. Andrea Morgan, who specialized in family estrangement and boundary issues in adult parent-child relationships. Our first session was scheduled for the following week at Dr. Morgan's office. I arrived 15 minutes early, using the time to center myself and review my personal boundaries. My parents arrived 5 minutes before the appointment, looking nervous but respectful of the process. Dr. Morgan established ground rules for our session: no interrupting, no personal attacks, and the use of I statements rather than accusatory language. She began by asking each of us to share our perspective on what had brought us to therapy. My father spoke first, initially falling into defensive patterns about how hard they had worked and how they deserved retirement, but gradually shifting to acknowledge that they had come to see me as a financial resource rather than a daughter with her own needs and life. My mother spoke next, more emotionally, expressing genuine remorse for the birthday text message that had been the breaking point. I typed it without thinking, she admitted. We were excited about the concert, and it just didn't occur to me how hurtful those words would be. When my turn came, I spoke clearly about my experience of providing significant financial support while receiving little emotional support in return. I explained how the pattern of missed important events had made me feel consistently devalued, culminating in the birthday text that had crystallized the one-sided nature of our relationship. I don't regret helping you financially, I concluded. I regret allowing that help to become an expectation rather than a gift, and I regret not establishing clear boundaries years ago. Dr. Morgan guided us through a structured conversation about expectations, responsibilities, and what a healthier relationship might look like moving forward. My parents struggled at points, particularly when discussing their sense of entitlement to my financial support. We just assumed. My father began, then stopped himself. No, that's not right. We didn't assume. We came to expect it. And when something is expected rather than appreciated, it changes the dynamic entirely. By the end of the session, we had established a framework for future interactions. No financial support from me, scheduled visits with clear beginning and end times, respect for my personal boundaries, and continued family therapy as we worked through decades of dysfunctional patterns. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, "Your letter mentioned you'd verified we were taking the steps we described?" I nodded. Jason drove by the house and confirmed the for sale sign. And I called the community center where Dad applied for the part-time administrative position. They confirmed his interview is scheduled for next week. My father looked surprised. "You were checking up on us?" "Trust needs to be rebuilt," I replied simply. Words are a beginning, but consistent actions over time are what matter now. They nodded, accepting this reality without argument. As we walked to the parking lot, my mother asked if we could hug goodbye. I considered for a moment, then agreed to a brief embrace. It felt different somehow. Less like she was trying to extract something from me and more like genuine affection. "We'll see you next week at Dr. Morgan's office," I said as we parted ways. "And please remember, no unscheduled visits or calls between sessions for now." They both agreed, and as I drove home, I felt cautiously optimistic. The road ahead would be challenging as we attempted to redefine our relationship on healthier terms, but for the first time in years, it seemed possible that we might eventually build something authentic and mutually respectful. 6 months passed since that first therapy session, bringing changes I could never have imagined when I received that devastating birthday text. The most noticeable difference was in my own life and well-being. Without the financial burden of my parents' mortgage, I had saved enough for a down payment on a small but charming 2-bedroom condo in a neighborhood I had always admired. My realtor handed me the keys on a sunny Tuesday afternoon, and I stood alone in my very own living room, overwhelmed by the significance of the moment. "This is mine," I whispered to the empty space. Something I built for myself. The walls were still bare, the rooms unfurnished except for essential pieces, but it represented something profound. The tangible result of putting myself first after years of prioritizing others. My parents had successfully sold their house, downsizing to a rental apartment closer to the community center where my father had secured the part-time administrative position he'd interviewed for. My mother had found work at a local florist shop, arranging bouquets 3 days a week. The combined income from these jobs, their social security benefits, and careful budgeting allowed them to live independently, if more modestly than before. Our relationship had evolved gradually through continued therapy sessions. Dr. Morgan helped us navigate difficult conversations about past hurts and expectations for the future. My parents still occasionally slipped into old patterns, particularly my mother's tendency to use guilt as a tool and my father's expectation that his preferences should take priority. But now, when these behaviors emerged, we had the language and framework to address them directly. The first truly respectful interaction came 3 months after our initial session. We met for lunch at a casual restaurant, with clearly established start and end times. My mother had researched the menu ahead of time to find dishes that accommodated my preference for vegetarian options. My father asked thoughtful questions about my new position at work, listening to my responses without interrupting or making the conversation about himself. When the meal ended exactly at the agreed-upon time, they both stood to leave without attempting to extend the visit or make additional requests. My mother hugged me briefly, saying simply, "This was nice. Thank you for making time for us." That lunch became a monthly tradition, supplemented by our ongoing therapy sessions. Each interaction built a small measure of trust, creating a foundation for a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. In my personal life, I developed a new awareness of boundaries in all my relationships. I became more comfortable saying no when friends asked for favors that felt overwhelming, and more intentional about spending time with people who energized rather than depleted me. I declined opportunities for advancement at work that would have required sacrificing my newfound work-life balance, recognizing that my value wasn't determined by constant achievement or self-sacrifice. My brother Jason and I grew closer through this experience, discovering that we had both been manipulated in different ways by our parents' expectations. He had been pressured to succeed academically and professionally to validate their parenting, while I had been pressured to provide financial and emotional support without reciprocation. Understanding these parallel experiences helped us develop a supportive sibling relationship independent of our parents' influence. As my 33rd birthday approached, I made modest plans for dinner with friends at my new condo. I sent my parents a casual invitation, making it clear that this was one event among many, not a test of their commitment to our new relationship. They responded promptly, confirming their attendance and asking if they could bring a dessert. When the evening arrived, they showed up exactly on time, bringing a homemade cake and a small, thoughtfully chosen gift, a set of high-quality paintbrushes for my digital art tablet, something I had mentioned in passing during our previous lunch. The evening progressed without drama or tension, my parents integrating naturally with my friends and departing at the agreed-upon time with warm but appropriate goodbyes. As I reflected on the year that had passed since that pivotal birthday text, several important lessons crystallized. First, my worth isn't measured by what I give to others. For years, I had defined my value through financial support and self-sacrifice, believing that being needed was the same as being loved. I now understood that true love exists without exploitation or advantage-taking. Second, standing up for myself isn't selfish. Setting boundaries isn't about punishing others, but about honoring my own needs and teaching people how to treat me with respect. Every time I enforced a boundary, I reinforced my own self-worth. Third, it's never too late to change dysfunctional patterns. After decades of unhealthy dynamics, my parents and I had found a way to begin reshaping our relationship. The process wasn't perfect or complete, but the progress was undeniable. Fourth, financial independence and emotional independence are deeply interconnected. By reclaiming control of my finances, I had also reclaimed my emotional agency and self-determination. Finally, sometimes a painful moment can become the catalyst for positive change. That birthday text, as hurtful as it was, ultimately forced me to confront patterns I had been avoiding for years. Without that moment of clarity, I might still be caught in the cycle of giving without receiving, of being everyone's priority except my own. This journey from financial supporter to emotional freedom has transformed not just my relationship with my parents, but my entire approach to life. I now recognize my inherent value beyond what I can provide for others. I've learned to balance generosity with self-preservation, compassion with boundaries, For anyone watching who recognizes their own story and mine, I want you to know that you deserve relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. Setting boundaries isn't easy, especially with family, but it's essential for your well-being. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for others is to stop enabling behaviors that ultimately harm both them and you. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? What was that experience like for you? Share your story in the comments below, and let me know if my journey resonates with your own. If this story helped you in any way, please like and subscribe for more conversations about healthy relationships and personal growth. And remember, it's never too late to prioritize yourself. Thank you for being here with me today.